100 Spartans. You think of men, don't you? Greek heroes fighting Persian tyrants. But history forgot to tell you
that the most ruthless and brilliant naval strategist in that entire war wasn't a Spartan king. It was a Greek queen fighting for the Persians. Her name was Artemisia, and this is her hidden truth.
Can you hear that? That is the sound of the Aegean Sea, an ancient sound carrying both salt and secrets. Take a deep breath. You can smell the salt in the air. Feel the cold damp of the night. Imagine you are standing on the deck of a warship. Dark, wet wood beneath your feet. Sails full like lungs in the blackness above.
You hear the sound of hundreds of oars striking the water in unison, like a giant, weary heartbeat.
But you are not a sailor. You are not a soldier. You are the queen, and you are hunting.
Welcome to The Hidden Truth. I am Anna, and tonight, by this fireside, we are going to unravel one of the most incredible and brutally hidden stories in history.
Our story begins in the year 480 BC. A shadow is moving across the world. No, not a shadow, a storm. A man-made storm.
King Xerxes of Persia, the king of kings, is angry. His empire has swallowed the known world from India to Egypt. But there is one small, annoying stain on his map, a collection of arrogant, fractured city-states, Greece. 10 years earlier, his father, King Darius, tried to crush them at Marathon and failed. Now, Xerxes is coming back, not to conquer, but to erase.
He is assembling the largest fleet the world has ever seen. Ancient historians, like Herodotus, who we'll be speaking of a lot, say he had over 1,000 warships, more than 3,000 support vessels, a land army so large they drank rivers dry as they passed. Imagine that, standing on the coast and seeing the horizon disappear, blotted out, not by clouds, but by Persian sails. The kings and generals of Greece, they are panicking. They bicker, they pray to their gods. They know this is the apocalypse. The entire world is holding its breath.
Now, imagine Xerxes' war council, a massive silk tent thick with smoke and spice. The king sits on his throne, and around him, his commanders, hundreds of men, Phoenician admirals, hard as the sea, Egyptian generals with ancient eyes, Persian princes in glittering armor. They are men of war, men of power. They report, they boast, they flatter. And then 5 warships arrive. 5 triremes, fast and lethal, from a small coastal state called Halicarnassus, a vassal of Persia. And their commander steps into the tent alone, walks through the sea of men, They stop talking, they turn to look, the rustle of silk and leather, because the commander of those 5 ships, the only one standing in that war council of men, is a Greek woman.
Her name is Artemisia. This is the first hidden truth. The anomaly. The thing historians have been trying to explain away for 2 millennia. They say she joined out of duty, that because her homeland, Halicarnassus, was part of the Persian Empire, she had to send ships. They say she did it for her son, the young heir, who was too young to rule. I don't believe that. Not for a second. Duty is sending 5 ships, giving them to a general, sending your best wishes. Ambition is sailing them yourself. Duty is bowing to the King of Kings. Cunning is recognizing that the greatest war in human history is about to begin, and you want a front row seat. Do you think she joined out of loyalty? Out of obligation to a foreign king? Or did she join for the opportunity? The chance to see the old world burn, to see what she could build from the ashes. Let me know what you think in the comments. Loyalty or ambition? To understand her, we can't look at that war tent. We have to look at where she was born, at her blood. Who was she? She was a paradox, a Greek woman who would fight against Greece. Why? Because her father was Greek, but her mother was Carian, and that changes everything. The Carians. They were the native people of that land, modern-day Turkey, an ancient, proud people. And to the Greeks in Athens, who considered themselves so civilized, the Carians were barbarians. They were mercenaries. They were master sailors. And yes, they were pirates. They didn't just worship the Greek gods. They had their own, older, darker gods. Their patron goddess was Hecate, the goddess of crossroads, the goddess of magic, the goddess of doorways and of shadows, the symbol of wise cruelty. Imagine growing up with that. Imagine having 2 souls fighting inside you. From your Greek father, you learn logic, philosophy, order. You learn how to argue in a public forum. You learn about honor. But from your Carian mother, you learn instinct. You learn the chaos of the ocean. You learn that honor is a luxury spoken of by men who are about to die. You learn that a sharp dagger can end an argument faster than an eloquent speech. The Greeks looked at the world and asked, "Is this right?" The Carians looked at the world and asked, "Does this work?" And Artemisia, she learned both. She grew up, was married to the king of Halicarnassus, a political marriage, as was the custom. And then her husband died. History doesn't say how. Very convenient. She was left alone with a shaky throne and a young son. Greek logic said she must find a regent, a strong man to rule for her son. But her Carian blood, the whisper of Hecate at the crossroads, it asked a different question. Why not you? She did what no proper Greek woman would ever dare to do. She took the throne for herself. Not as a placeholder, but as queen regent. A tyrant, as the Greeks called it. A pirate queen, ruling by cruelty and wisdom. She was ready. She ruled. She had built Halicarnassus into a formidable naval power, and that is when Xerxes came knocking. That is when the Lioness met the king. Historians say Xerxes had everything. The largest army, the largest fleet, endless gold. He had engineers, oracles, slaves. He even had men he called the Immortals. But he was missing one thing. One thing a tyrant, surrounded by fear, always lacks: He was missing someone who dared to say no. And in that suffocating room, full of flattery, full of men nodding in agreement, he found it in the only woman. On the next episode, A Seat at the Men's Table, we will see how she used the truth as a weapon and why that made her the most trusted and the most hated advisor in the entire Persian fleet. Thank you for listening to The Hidden Truth. Sleep well. Welcome back to The Hidden Truth. I am Anna. Can you hear that? That sound? That is the sound of whispers. The sound of a room that changes the moment you walk into it. Imagine this. Tomorrow morning, you walk into a meeting. Maybe it's a boardroom, all glass and steel. Or maybe it's a virtual room on Zoom. The room is full of powerful men. They are talking, laughing, their body language is relaxed. And then you walk in. Instantly, it stops. The smiles fade. They stop talking. They look at you. All of them. Not with welcome, not with respect. First, it's curiosity. What is she doing here? Next, it's dismissal. Who does she think she is? And then, buried deep beneath, a little bit of fear. Could she take something from me?
You have to walk from the door to the only empty chair. Every step is a judgment. You can feel their eyes like a physical weight on your shoulders.
They are judging your clothes, your hair, the way you walk. They wait for you to speak just so they can interrupt. You feel like you have to fight just to be heard. You have to prove just to exist. That was the daily life of Artemisia. Except her boardroom wasn't glass. It was King Xerxes' war tent. And those men weren't executives. They were murderous admirals and generals, men who had conquered nations with fire and sword. In the last episode, we saw her walk into that tent, a Greek queen, the only woman in the Persian high command. We saw her choose ambition over duty. We saw how her Khazarian blood, the blood of Hecate, of pragmatist pirates, gave her a wisdom the other Greeks lacked. But power isn't just getting a seat at the table, it's keeping it. And this is the second hidden truth. Those men weren't just annoyed, they hated her. Herodotus, our historian, the Greek man who was both admiring and possibly biased, obsessed with this Greek woman. He details it, Herodotus 8.68. He says the other Persian commanders were bitterly jealous. They were indignant. They were indignant that she was a better commander. They were indignant that her ships were better equipped. And they were most indignant, that King Xerxes listened to her. They did what insecure men always do when threatened by a talented woman. They started rumors. They started poisoning the well.
They pulled Xerxes' advisors aside. Does the king really trust this Greek woman? She is too bold. She will get us all killed. She is just a woman. She will panic at the sight of blood. Majesty, you cannot be serious. She is an embarrassment. They tried to poison the well. They tried to make her a joke. They wanted her to fail. They needed her to fail. Because her success was an insult to their pride. So, how did she survive? In a sea of sharks, how did this lioness hold her ground? She didn't do what many of us might try to do. She didn't try to be liked. She didn't try to make friends. She didn't try to soften her edges. She didn't laugh at their jokes. She didn't pretend to be weaker to make them feel strong. No, her Carian blood wouldn't allow it. She understood a fundamental truth about power. Likability is fleeting. Respect is good, but being indispensable, that is armor. She didn't play the petty games. She didn't waste her time on whispers. She focused on one thing, the only thing King Xerxes cared about more than anything else: results. The history books do not record this next part explicitly. Herodotus only shows us the result, that she was trusted for her wisdom. But, based on what we know of her Carian blood, of her pragmatic pirate past, we can interpret what happened. This is the hidden truth between the lines. Imagine, while the Persian fleet was on the move, Artemisia wasn't just following, she was hunting.
Imagine she captured a Greek merchant ship, a grain hauler trying to slip the blockade. What would a normal Persian commander do? Burn the ship, kill the crew, take the grain. A simple act of war. Artemisia saw something different. She didn't see a ship. She saw an asset. She captured the vessel, brought them aboard her flagship, and she interrogated the crew. We cannot look away from this. The Hollywood warrior goddess persona wants her to skip this part, wants her to be perfect. But the hidden truth is often ugly. She was a Carian ruler. She was ruthless when required.
She didn't torture them for sport. She tortured them for information. She turned her cruelty into a strategic weapon. She didn't ask them about gold. She asked them about things that mattered. Where are the Greek sea lanes, the hidden currents? Where are the reefs? Where do the Athenian patrols go, and when? Where do they get their fresh water? When she was done,
She didn't just have a ship of grain. She had a detailed map of her enemy's weaknesses. She brought that intelligence not to the other admirals. She brought it straight to King Xerxes. Now, you are Xerxes. Your generals bring you flattery, rumors, and complaints. Artemisia brings you the key to defeating your enemy. Who are you going to trust? She made herself indispensable. She proved she wasn't just a woman in the room. She was the only one actually doing the work. Herodotus writes, and I love this, he writes that the male commanders were, quote, annoyed that a woman would dare to give them advice. Sound familiar, everyone? It's been 2,500 years. We've traded silk tents for air-conditioned offices. We've traded warships for spreadsheets. But I wonder, has that room really changed all that much? Have you ever been in that room? Have you ever been the one to speak the truth and been called annoying or aggressive for it? Let me know what you think in the comments. That jealousy, does it ever go away? Use the hashtag #HiddenTruthArtemisia. I've been in that room. Maybe you have too. That feeling when you present an idea and it's ignored, only to have a male colleague say the exact same thing 10 minutes later and be called sharp. In those moments, I learned from Artemisia.
I stopped trying to be liked. I started focusing on the results, because results are the one thing they cannot argue with. That is the armor. By delivering results, by her smart cruelty, Artemisia earned her seat. She earned the trust of King Xerxes. He began to rely on her. He began to realize that this one Carian Greek voice was his most valuable asset. But that trust, that newfound faith, was about to be tested. The great Persian fleet, the 1,000-ship monster, had finally found its prey. The small, nimble Greek fleet was waiting for them. The first battle, the first blood was coming. The Battle of Artemisium. The night before the battle, Xerxes calls his war council. The tent is full of men, again. But this time, he doesn't ask all of them. He turns to the only woman. He asks her for advice.
And her advice was the one and only piece of advice he ignored. On the next episode, The First Blood, we will see what happens when a king ignores the only good advice he has, and Artemisia is forced to clean up the mess with blood and fire. Sleep well.
Breathe. Stay calm. Inhale. Exhale. You can smell it. The smell of splintered pine and sweat. A spray of salt water and blood hits your face. You hear screams in Greek, screams in Persian. They blend together, a symphony of panic. This is not a drill. This is not a war room. This is the absolute chaos of the Battle of Artemision. The massive Persian fleet is crashing into the tiny Greek fleet. Thousands of men are drowning in the narrow water.
And in the middle of that storm, on the deck of her flagship, Artemisia is calm. She is watching. Welcome back to The Hidden Truth. I am Anna. She is calm because she saw this coming. She knew this would happen. She warned them. In the last episode, we left her in the war tent. After earning the trust of King Xerxes, he finally asked for her advice. The night before the battle, the King of Kings wanted a spectacle. He wanted to crush the tiny Greek fleet with the sheer power of his 1,000 warships. A head-on punch to show the world who was master. A glorious battle to end the war. All the male admirals, all the Persian generals, they agreed. Yes, Majesty, let us destroy them. They are just weak Greeks. One blow is all it will take. Artemisia was the only one who said no. Imagine the silence in that tent. The only woman daring to tell the King of Kings he was wrong. She stood before him, her voice perhaps a whisper too. A sharp Carian whisper. Majesty, do not fight them here. She told him,
You have more ships. Use them, don't just show them. Use your fleet to blockade them. Cut off their supplies. Use your ships to take the islands around them. Land on the mainland. Starve them out. Make them desperate. And then she said the line that must have made every other admiral in the room want to kill her. Their ships are faster than yours. Their sailors are better in tight spaces. They are better fighters on the sea. Majesty, do not fight them where they want to fight. How did she know that? How was she so sure? Because this is the key detail. Those men on those Greek ships, the ones she was about to kill, they were her people. She wasn't just a Carian queen. She was half Greek. She understood the Greek psyche. She understood their pride, their recklessness. She knew they wouldn't fight with honor. They would fight to win at any cost. She knew these waters. This was their backyard. These narrow, treacherous, reef-filled straits were their home. The Persian fleet was just a clumsy, giant tourist. Xerxes saw an outmatched fleet. Artemisia saw a cornered snake. She knew it would strike. But the king, blinded by his own pride, surrounded by the flattery of his male generals, ignored her. He praised her courage for speaking the truth, and then he ordered the attack. Artemisia was forced into a battle she knew was a strategic mistake. A disaster caused by the foolishness of men. So what does she do? Does she hang back? Does she protect her 5 precious ships? Does she say, "I told you so," and let them sail? No, that is not the Carian way. That is not the way of Hecate. If you are forced to do a job, you do it better than anyone else. If you're forced to clean up a mess, you do it spectacularly. She didn't just fight. She excelled. Herodotus, our narrator, who was clearly mesmerized by her, he says that of the entire Persian fleet, Artemisia's ships were among the most effective. She inflicted the heaviest damage on the Greeks. While the other massive Persian ships were crashing into each other in panic, blocking their own allies' escape routes,
Artemisia's 5 triremes were like scalpels moving through the chaos. She was a pirate queen. This was her element. She rammed, she boarded, she called clear commands. She turned the chaos into her weapon. She wasn't just a strategist in a tent, she was a warrior on the deck.
And she wanted King Xerxes, who was watching from a hill on the shore, to see exactly who was fighting for him. To see exactly who had been right. Have you ever been in that situation? You're in a meeting. You see the fatal flaw in the plan. You speak up. You warn them. You lay out your logic perfectly. You give them the data, and your boss, or your client, they listen, they nod. And then they say, "Thank you for your input, but we're going to do it the other way." That feeling, that hot feeling in your chest, the mix of anger, frustration, and that ugly feeling of, "I knew it." And now, the plan has failed. Everything is on fire. Everyone is running around in panic. And who do they look to clean up the mess? They look at you. Artemisia was in that exact moment. Ignored, but still required to fight. She had to clean up the king's mess with blood and fire. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had an Artemisia moment at work? When you knew you were right, were ignored, and had to be the one to fix it? Share it. #HiddenTruthArtemisia. The Battle of Artemisium raged for 3 days. It was a bloody mess. There was no clear winner. Both sides took heavy losses. The Persians lost hundreds of ships, many not to the Greeks, but to a sudden, violent storm. The Greeks said it was sent by the gods. The Greek fleet was battered, but not broken. Technically, it was a draw. But Artemisia, she knew the hidden truth. A draw for the tiny Greek fleet was a victory. They had survived. They had proven the Persian giant could bleed. A draw for the mighty Persian fleet was a disaster. It was a humiliation.
She looked at the wreckage floating in the sea. She looked at her Carian sailors, dead on her decks. She looked at the clumsy Persian ships, too big, too slow, and she saw the future. She knew. Right then, she knew. This tactic, this brute force tactic, was not going to work. As she sailed back to Xerxes' camp, she received news. News even more frightening than the naval battle. While they were fighting on the water, a land battle had taken place at a narrow pass called Thermopylae. A small band of 300 Spartan warriors had held off the entire Persian army for 3 days. Xerxes had won there. Yes, he had slaughtered the 300, but the cost was humiliating. It had shamed him. Artemisia was returning not to a smug king, but to an enraged king. A king who had just tasted real resistance. A king who had just seen what 300 determined men could do. She knew. Right then, she knew.
She had one more chance. One last chance to save him and to save herself from his catastrophic pride. The next battle would not be a skirmish. It would be the apocalypse. It would be the Battle of Salamis. On the next episode, the Salamis Gambit. The battle that would decide the fate of Western civilization. And the one single act, so ruthless, so brilliant, and so terrifying, that saved Artemisia's life and made her a legend. Sleep well.
Welcome back to The Hidden Truth. Tonight we need to talk about a question, an uncomfortable one. Where is the line between betrayal and survival? When is an act of ruthlessness not evil, but genius? When is sacrificing one person to save yourself not cowardice, but the only move left on the board? Keep that question in your mind, because tonight we are going to watch a woman get cornered. And she is going to answer that question with steel and oak. In the last episode, we left an enraged King Xerxes. His fleet was humiliated at Artemisium. The 300 Spartans had turned his victory at Thermopylae into a bloody joke. The King of Kings had been shamed. And now he wanted blood. The Greek fleet, battered but not broken, had retreated. They gathered in a narrow, treacherous strait, a natural trap, a place called Salamis. The Persians had captured Athens. They had burned the Acropolis.
On paper, they had won, but the Greek fleet was still there, like an annoying thorn. Xerxes calls his final war council. This is it. The tent is suffocating. The air is thick with fear. The generals are no longer arrogant. Now they are nervous. They know their king is in the mood to take someone's head. He asks the question, do we attack them here, in Salamis? And one by one, the admirals, the male commanders, they say the thing they know the king wants to hear. They say the safe thing. Yes, Majesty, of course. Let us finish them once and for all. They are trapped. Our fleet will crush them. A chorus of sycophants and cowards. And then, in the silence that follows, Xerxes turns his head. He looks to the only woman in the room, Artemisia. The only one who had been right at Artemisium. He asks her, "What say you?" You can feel the eyes of every man in that tent burning into her. Their jealousy now turned to hatred. They are willing her to be wrong. Artemisia steps forward. She knows her life is on the line. Telling the truth to an angry tyrant is a form of suicide, and she does it anyway. She is the only one who says no. Herodotus, our historian, records this speech almost word for word. It is stunning. She doesn't just say no. She tells him why, with brutal honesty. "My king," she says, "these Greeks, they are as superior to us on the sea as men are to women." She has to say that to soothe their egos. So why would you risk your fleet in a narrow place? You have already captured Athens. You have achieved your goal. Keep your fleet here or take them to their shores. They cannot stay at Salamis long. They have no provisions. They will scatter to their own cities, and you can take them one by one. But if you rush, and if you attack them in that narrow strait, I fear that your land army will harm your sea army. What is she saying? She's saying your huge, clumsy ships are going to crash into each other. You will defeat yourself. She is the only one telling him the truth. And this is the tragedy of absolute power. The most incredible part of this story. What does Xerxes do? Herodotus says he loved her advice. He praised her. He told his other generals he always knew she was his smartest advisor. He honored her publicly for daring to speak the truth. And then he completely ignored it. He gave the order to attack. Why? Why would a leader ask for the truth, get the truth, praise the truth, and then do the exact opposite? Ego. Pride. He couldn't stand being held back. He couldn't stand looking weak. He would rather lose his entire fleet than lose face. Tell me, have you ever seen that? A leader, a boss, a politician, surrounded by the truth, but choosing foolishness purely out of pride? It is a story as old as history itself. The battle begins, and it is a disaster. Immediately, the Greeks had pretended to retreat, and the massive Persian fleet charged right into the trap, exactly as Artemisia had predicted. The strait was too narrow.
The thousands of Persian ships were compressed like corks in a bottle. They couldn't turn, they couldn't move. The small, nimble Greek triremes darted out from every side, ramming the flanks of the clumsy giants. And then, the ultimate chaos. The Persian ships began crashing into each other. Oars snapped. Commanders screamed useless orders. They were sinking themselves. On a hill overlooking the strait, King Xerxes sat on a golden throne, watching the total annihilation of his invincible fleet. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. And in that nightmare is Artemisia, on her ship. She is not panicking. She is surviving. She is fighting her way out of the trap. She is trying to get her ship back to open water. And then it happens. Through the smoke, a Greek ship spots her. Not just any Greek ship. The ship of Amidst of Pellene, one of the most aggressive Athenian commanders. He recognizes Artemisia's flagship. He knows who she is, and he wants the glory of capturing the pirate queen. He begins his pursuit. His ship is faster. He is gaining. 5 more minutes. She will be captured, killed, or worse. Artemisia orders her crew to row for their lives. She scans for an escape route, any escape, and she sees a gap, but it is blocked.
Blocked by another ship. Not a Greek ship. A Persian ship, an ally. The ship of the King of Kalinda, a friendly ship, clumsy, slow-moving, sitting directly in her only path to safety. This is it. This is Hecate's crossroads. Cornered. The Athenian enemy charging from behind. The Persian ally blocking the front. There is no escape. What does Greek logic say? Surrender, die with honor. What does Carian blood say? Survive. She turns to her ship's helmsman. Everyone is watching her. She doesn't scream. She whispers her command. An insane command. Ram it! The helmsman hesitates. My queen, that is... I know who it is! Ram it! Artemisia's ship smashes directly into the side of the allied Persian ship with its full force. The Kalindan vessel splinters. It sinks almost instantly, taking its king and its entire crew with it. No, listen closely, because this is the GAMBIT. This is the ruthless genius of Artemisia. 1 act, 2 results. Result number 1, the Greeks. Amidst, the Athenian captain chasing her. He sees this. He sees Artemisia's ship just ram and sink another Persian vessel. What does he think? He thinks, my gods, she's defected. She's a Greek, and she's turned on them to fight for us. He immediately stops the chase. He turns his ship and goes to find another Persian target. Artemisia is free. Result number 2, the Persians. Remember, where is King Xerxes? He's on the hill, watching. What does he see through the smoke and chaos? He can't make out the flag of the Kalindan ship. He just sees his favorite admiral, Artemisia, bravely ramming and sinking an enemy ship. Or so he assumes. Herodotus says that when Xerxes saw this,
on a day filled with disaster and cowardice, he leaped to his feet. He turned to his advisors and uttered the immortal line, the line that would live on in history.
My men have become women, and my woman has become a man. She did it. She escaped the trap. She killed her ally. She fooled her enemy. And she was praised by her king as a hero. One single act that deceived both sides of the war. So, I ask you again, the question from the beginning, was that betrayal or survival? Was it a war crime, or was it the most brilliant gambit of the entire war? Let me know in the comments. What would you have done? That night, Artemisia sailed back to Xerxes' camp. The fleet was shattered. Hundreds of ships lost, thousands of men dead. The pride of Persia was at the bottom of the Salamis Strait. Xerxes was broken, but Artemisia, she did not return as a failure.
She returned as the only hero of the Empire's darkest day. Only she and her surviving crew knew the truth. She knew she had survived the battle, but her real war, the war to escape this broken king, was just beginning. On the next episode, the Queen's escape. The battle is over, but Artemisia has one last mission to perform, the most dangerous mission of all. Escorting the king's legacy through hostile waters and disappearing from history. Sleep well.
Welcome back to The Hidden Truth. I am Anna. This is the sound of the morning after, the sound of failure. The great Persian fleet is broken. What wasn't sunk at Salamis is now fleeing in panic. Hundreds of ships abandoned. Thousands, tens of thousands of men stranded on the Greek coast. No food, no leadership, no hope. The most powerful empire the world had ever seen was just broken by a tiny nation they despised. And King Xerxes, the king of kings, where is he? He is panicking. He is no longer a god on a golden throne.
He is a terrified man in a tent. His pride, the pride that made him ignore Artemisia, has now turned to pure terror. He is no longer thinking of glory. He is no longer thinking of conquest. He is thinking of one thing: how to get home. The retreat by land will be a nightmare. A disintegrated army hunted for 1,000 miles of hostile territory. He knows he might not make it, but there is a problem bigger than his own life. A secret he has kept. A fatal vulnerability. He brought his sons.
The princes of Persia, the legitimate heirs to the empire. Boys. They are in the camp, watching their fathers collapse. Xerxes cannot take them on the chaotic land retreat. One stray arrow, a mutiny from starving soldiers, a Greek ambush. In his legacy, the future of the Persian Empire is over. He needs to get his sons out of Greece by sea,
quickly, quietly, a secret mission through waters that are now controlled by his enemy. So, this panicked, broken king, who has just watched his entire command structure fail,
Who does he trust with the future of his dynasty? Does he call Mardonius his arrogant land general? No. Does he call any of his surviving Persian admirals? No. He doesn't trust any of them. They flattered him. They failed him. No. He calls Artemisia. This is the key detail, the most incredible hidden truth of the entire story. After Salamis, after she was, as far as he knew, the only hero, after she, as we know, accidentally killed an ally to save herself, after all the lies and the manipulation and the pride, the only thing left was trust. He trusted her, the Greek woman, the outsider, the only person who had dared to say no to him. He knew that in his entire empire, she was the only one ruthless enough, smart enough, and pragmatic enough to get the job done.
he handed her his legacy, his sons, into her hands, and he begged her, take them home. And Artemisia, what did she do? She could have bargained. Give me gold, give me more islands. She could have mocked him. I told you so. No, a Carian strategist knows when to cash out. She saw the sinking Persian ship. She knew this war was over. This was her exit ticket. She accepted the mission immediately, without a word of complaint. She gathered her 5 remaining triremes. She took the Persian princes on board. And in the chaos of the retreat, while the rest of the army was eating itself alive, she disappeared. There was no final battle. There was no final speech. The pirate queen, the only female admiral, the hero of Salamis, walked away from the war. That journey, I often think of that journey. It was not a voyage of glory. It was a mission of shadows.
Her ships, painted black, moving by night, slipping past Greek islands that were now celebrating victory, dodging the Athenian patrols who were hunting for her, the hero they thought had defected, who had now vanished.
She had to use every bit of her Carian cunning, every pirate skill, every piece of knowledge of the hidden currents she had tortured out of those sailors. She did not fight. She hid, a ghost, carrying the future of an empire through hostile waters. And she succeeded. The history books don't record the details. They only record the result. She made it to Ephesus, a safe Persian city. She delivered the princes, safe and sound, to the king's guardians. She had completed her final mission. And then she vanished completely from history. Herodotus, the father of history, our only source, the man who had been obsessed with her, who recorded her speeches, her tactics, her ruthlessness, stops writing about her. After she hands over the princes, the name Artemisia is never mentioned again in the entire rest of his histories. She had done her job. She had survived. She had won her Game of Thrones. She did the impossible. She walked out of history at the top. She presumably returned to Halicarnassus, to her throne, to her son, a wealthy, powerful, feared queen who had seen the world burn and had come home intact. That should have been the end. It is a perfect ending. The smart queen survives. But history hates an open ending. History, especially history written by men, cannot stand an ending where the complex, smart woman simply retires. They cannot accept that a powerful woman lived a happy, peaceful life after outsmarting them all. No. They needed to punish her for it. They needed to kill her. And since Herodotus didn't give them an ending, they invented one. And the way they did it, the death they assigned her, was more ruthless than the Battle of Salamis. It was an assassination. She had survived the war, but she would not survive what came next. On our final episode, The Two Deaths of Artemisia, we will explore her real ending and the false one that history tried to force upon her. A story of rejected love, a cliff, and one final attempt to erase the woman they could never control. Sleep well. Hello. Welcome back to The Hidden Truth. One last time for this story. When I finished the research for this final episode, I sat watching this fire for a long time, and I realized I don't feel sad. I feel angry. A cold, quiet anger. We have sat here together for 6 nights. We have peeled back the layers of myth. We have seen this woman, smart, pragmatic, ruthless, a politician, a strategist, a survivor. We watched her do the impossible. She won. She survived the world's greatest war. She outsmarted the King of Kings. She saved her throne. And she disappeared from history intact. She won. But the death that history, later history, assigned her, it's not an ending. It's an assassination. A character assassination. As we saw, our primary source, Herodotus, just stops. She delivers the princes and vanishes. The most logical story? She returned to Halicarnassus. She ruled. She raised her son Lygdamus, who succeeded her.
And she died, years later, presumably a powerful, feared old queen, in her own bed. But history written by men, hates an ending like that. They hate a powerful woman just winning. They needed to punish her. Punish her for being smarter than them. Punish her for being as ruthless as them. Punish her for surviving. So hundreds of years later, long after Herodotus was dead, other male historians, playwrights, decided they needed to fix her story. They invented an ending. And this is the first death of Artemisia. They said that Artemisia, the Carian queen, the hero of Salamis, fell in love. Not just in love, she fell desperately, uncontrollably in love with a beautiful young man,
named Dardanus. And he rejected her. And Artemisia, the woman who stared down Xerxes, the woman who rammed an allied ship to survive, supposedly fell apart. So distraught over love, so hysterical.
She went to the Leucadian cliff, a famous lover's leap, and she jumped to her death.
Do you believe that? Do you really believe that? The woman who looked at the chaos of Salamis and saw a gambit couldn't see a way out of a broken heart? The woman who used male ego as a weapon died because of her own wounded ego? It's absurd. But it's not just absurd. It's deliberate. This is how history punishes women it cannot control. This is how they tell us, don't worry, she may have seemed smart, but really, she was just a weak, emotional woman. They couldn't erase her actions. Herodotus had recorded them. They were too famous. So instead, they had to poison her motive. They had to take her sharp Carian steel pragmatism and reduce it to a weakness. They had to turn the strategist into a lovesick teenager. It is a lie. A cowardly, misogynistic lie designed to put her back in her place. That was her first death. Death by character assassination. But she had a second death, a more modern one. Fast forward 2,500 years to our pop culture. If you know the name Artemisia today, it's probably not from Herodotus. It's probably from the movie 300, A Rise of an Empire. And what is she in that movie? A complex historical figure torn between two cultures? A master strategist? No.
She's a demon, a sexualized, leather-clad cartoon villain, a bloodthirsty, psychotic brute who kisses a severed head and is motivated by a nonsensical personal revenge. She's a monster. Do you see it? Do you see the final hidden truth here? These are the two deaths, the two traps history sets for powerful women. History cannot accept a woman who is complex. They must force her into one of two boxes. Box number one, the lovesick hysteric. A weak, emotional, hysterical creature. Basically, a child in a woman's body. Box number two, the demonic monster. An inhuman brute, a vicious harky, motivated by rage. Something not human that must be slain by the male hero. They can make her less than a man, weak, or more than human, a monster. But they can never, ever allow her to be an equal. The truth is, she was neither. She was not a lovesick hysteric. She was not a bloodthirsty demon. She was a politician. She was a strategist. She was a queen. She was a mother. And above all, she was a survivor. We remember the 300 Spartans. We are taught to honor them because they died nobly. They died beautifully. But maybe we should remember Artemisia because she lived intelligently. She lived complexly. She didn't die for honor. She lived for power. She lived for her son. She lived for her kingdom. She looked at a game she could not win by following the rules, and she decided to change the rules, and she won. Thank you.
Thank you for sitting by this fire with me for these 6 nights. Thank you for helping me dig up this one hidden truth.
Our history is a graveyard full of buried voices, full of women like Artemisia whose stories have been stolen or twisted or erased. But they aren't really gone. They're just waiting for us to find them.
Next week, we will dig up another one. If you want to continue this conversation, if there is a powerful, complex woman from history whose story has been forgotten, share it. Use the hashtag HiddenTruthArtemisia on X or wherever you talk. Let's find them together. For now, sleep well.